At my daughter's wedding. Andre's voice rang out, slick with arrogance. I'd like to introduce you all to the bride's father. He gestured toward me, his lips curling into a smirk. Guests leaned closer, champagne glasses clinking, curiosity thick in the air. This, Andre continued, his words sharp enough to cut, is that annoying beggar we're forced to put up with. Laughter rippled through the hall. My daughter's new in-laws chuckled, their jeweled hands covering their mouths as if I were some joke whispered at a country club. The sting burned deep, but I held my composure. Years of swallowing insults had taught me silence could be sharper than any retort. Maya, my daughter, stood frozen at Andre's side, her face pale. I caught the flicker of shame in her eyes, the shame of a child caught between love and loyalty. And then, like a crack of thunder in the middle of their laughter, Veronica Whitfield, Andre's mother, tilted her head, squinting at me as though she had just seen a ghost. Her voice trembled, but carried across the reception hall. Wait a minute! Aren't you the mysterious billionaire who bought our company? The laughter died instantly. Silence dropped heavy as stone, the only sound the faint clatter of a fork falling onto a plate. Andre's grin slipped from his face, his smirk collapsing into disbelief. Charles Whitfield straightened in his chair, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. Guests shifted, eyes widening, whispers rushing like wildfire. I stood there, letting the silence breathe, watching their pride turn to panic. They thought they knew me. They thought I was small, beneath them, someone to mock. But what they didn't know was everything. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing your stories. Now, let me take you back to how it all began. Long before the laughter at Maya's wedding, long before Andre Whitfield sneered at me in front of his polished friends, there was only me, a young father trying to hold my world together with trembling hands. Denise, my wife, my anchor, was taken too soon. Cancer stole her warmth before Maya had even turned 12. One day, there were 3 of us around the dinner table, laughter echoing off the walls. The next, it was just me and my daughter staring at empty chairs, pretending the silence didn't hurt. I worked any job I could find. Days at a construction site, nights hauling freight at the rail yard, weekends patching roofs for cash. My hands stayed raw, my back ached, but Maya never missed a meal. She never went to bed cold. When she wanted books, I bought them. When she wanted to play violin, I found a way to rent one. I refused to let her dreams shrink just because mine had been buried. People looked at me and saw a tired man in second-hand suits, a widower barely scraping by. They whispered, called me ordinary. Some days I wore that label like a shield. Other days it cut deeper than they'd ever know. But while they dismissed me, I was building something they couldn't see. Quietly, carefully, I put away every extra dollar. I studied markets late at night when Maya was asleep, teaching myself what no school had time to teach me. Years passed, and small investments became bigger ones. A rental property turned into 3, 3 turned into 7, and eventually I moved into stocks, technology, infrastructure. I became patient, deliberate, no flash, no noise, just discipline. And when the opportunity came to invest in something larger, something that could change everything, I moved like a shadow, quiet but sure. My face was never on a Forbes list. No magazine ever knocked at my door. That was by design. I never wanted the world to see me. I only wanted Maya to have a world Denise would have been proud of. Maya never knew about the accounts, the properties, the shares in companies her classmates bragged about working for. To her, I was just Dad, The man who packed her lunch and ironed the same suit 100 times. She thought my sacrifices were all she'd ever inherit. And that was fine. Let the world see me as a beggar. Let them laugh at my worn-out shoes, because they would never know, not until the moment I decided to show them, that behind the quiet, behind the humility, I was carrying an empire. Maya was 25 when she first brought Andre Whitfield home. She walked through the front door glowing, her hand tucked proudly into his, eyes shining like the little girl who used to sprint into my arms after school. Only this time, her smile wasn't for me. "Dad," she said, almost breathless, "this is Andre." Andre extended his hand. Smooth as silk, the kind of handshake you learn in boardrooms, not on job sites. His watch glinted beneath the living room light, a gold Rolex that looked more like a trophy than a timepiece. His suit was tailored, his smile practiced, every detail of him polished to perfection. "Mr. Brooks," he said, his voice smooth, confident, "it's an honor to finally meet you." I shook his hand, but I didn't miss the flicker in his eyes, the quick sweep over my faded shirt, my scuffed shoes, a silent judgment tucked behind courtesy. He thought he was hiding it. He wasn't. Over dinner, I listened. That's what I've always done. Andre spoke at length about his ambitions, his family's wealth, the Whitfield legacy. Charles and Veronica had built an empire in real estate, and Andre was eager to expand it, to make it the kind of empire everyone respected. He asked Maya questions about her job at the school, but his attention always drifted back to himself, his deals, his future. When I tried to steer the conversation toward family, toward values, he smiled politely and brought it back to his vision. At one point, he leaned back in his chair, looked at me, and said with a laugh, "Maya tells me you're retired now." That must be freeing. The way he said it wasn't curiosity. It was dismissal, like retirement was a polite word for useless. Maya squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes pleading, "Dad, don't start." So I didn't. I let Andre talk. I let him believe he was the sharpest man in the room. I let him think I was small, but inside, Denise's voice echoed, calm and clear. People reveal themselves if you let them speak long enough. By the end of the night, I knew exactly who Andre Whitfield was, and I knew exactly what he thought of me. A month after that first meeting, Maya insisted I join them for dinner at the Whitfield estate. She called it just a family get-together. But the moment I pulled into their gated driveway, I knew it was more than that. The house wasn't a home, it was a monument. Columns stretched skyward, lights flooded the lawn, a fleet of luxury cars lined the circular drive. I parked my decade-old sedan beside a silver Mercedes, and when I stepped out, I caught the quick glance from the valet, a look that said, "You don't belong here." Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, portraits of ancestors staring down from gilded frames. Andre led Maya proudly through the hall, his hand resting on the small of her back, like she was part of his presentation. I followed behind, clutching a small bouquet I'd picked up from a corner florist. Veronica Whitfield greeted me first, elegant, composed, her diamond necklace catching the chandelier's light. She kissed the air near my cheek, her smile warm but her eyes cool. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "so lovely you could join us." Her husband, Charles, extended a hand, firm and brief. He smelled of expensive cologne and entitlement. "Welcome!" We sat at a long dining table set for 12, though only 5 of us were there. Courses arrived on silver trays, lobster, lamb, dishes dressed in sauces I couldn't pronounce. The Whitfields spoke about investments, gala invitations, their summer property in Martha's Vineyard. When the conversation turned to me, Veronica's voice carried a rehearsed gentleness. "And what is it you do these days, Mr. Brooks? Retired, I believe?" I nodded. "I spend my time quietly now, reading, staying active, keeping life simple." Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes flicked toward Andre. "How quaint." Andre chuckled softly. "Maya's told me all about how hard-working you've been, Mr. Brooks. Truly inspiring. Not many men can live with so little and still smile." Maya's fork paused midair. Her eyes flashed with a plea again. "Please, Dad, don't react." I didn't. I let them talk. Veronica bragged about the family foundation. Charles outlined their expansion projects. Andre leaned back, sipping wine, soaking in their approval. And through it all, I sat in silence, listening, because I knew something they didn't. Years earlier, while they paraded their wealth, I had quietly purchased controlling shares of Whitfield Industries under another name. Their empire, the one they polished like a trophy, wasn't truly theirs anymore. As they spoke, oblivious, I thought of Denise's words in an old letter. "Power is loud, but strength is silent." So I stayed silent, smiling politely, as the people who looked down on me feasted on a meal I technically owned. The proposal wasn't a private moment between two people in love. It was a production. Andre rented out an upscale rooftop in downtown Atlanta, string lights glowing against the night sky, a jazz band playing soft notes in the corner. Photographers were stationed like hunters, ready to capture every angle. Guests sipped champagne, waiting for the performance to begin. I stood near the back, hands folded, watching my daughter glow. Maya wore a simple dress, her smile radiant as Andre led her into the spotlight. She looked at him with the kind of love her mother once gave me, the kind that makes a woman believe in forever. Andre dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that sparkled under the lights like it was born to blind. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Maya Brooks," he said, his voice carrying over the rooftop. "You are the love of my life. Will you make me the happiest man alive and marry me?" Maya covered her mouth, tears streaming, nodding before she could even form the word yes. The crowd erupted in applause. Photographers flashed, glasses clinked. Andre basked in the glow of his audience. I clapped too, because that's what was expected of me, but my hands felt heavy and my eyes drifted not to Andre, but to Maya. She saw love. I saw performance. When the music swelled, Andre slipped the ring onto her finger, holding it high for everyone to see. He kissed her hand like a man sealing a deal, then pulled her close as the cameras clicked. Later, while everyone toasted and Andre's parents beamed like royalty, I stepped onto the balcony. The city lights stretched endless, a reminder of how small we all really are. I pulled Denise's letter from my pocket, one she had written the year Maya turned 18. Her handwriting looped soft across the page. "Ray, promise me you'll let her choose her own path. Even if you don't agree, even if it breaks you. She deserves to live, even if it means she stumbles." I folded the letter slowly, tucking it back inside my jacket. My daughter was in love, or at least she believed she was. So I swallowed my doubts. I didn't stop the music, didn't question the ring, didn't challenge the man who was already proving himself louder than the love he claimed to give. Because sometimes protecting your child doesn't mean standing in the way. It means standing behind them, even when the ground ahead is shaking. The months leading up to the wedding were a blur of phone calls, fittings, and planning sessions that felt less like preparing for love and more like staging a Broadway show. The Whitfield spared no expense. The venue was booked at one of Atlanta's most prestigious halls, a place where chandeliers dripped crystal and even the napkins were embroidered with gold thread. Maya tried to keep me included. She brought me fabric samples, invited me to tastings, asked my opinion on flowers, but each time Andre or his parents would sweep in, their voices louder, their choices grander, brushing her efforts aside. "This is a Whitfield wedding," Veronica said more than once, her smile sharp as glass. "It must reflect our family's standards." And just like that, my daughter's voice was drowned out by the clinking of their glasses and the signing of their checks. I offered to cover a portion, something simple, meaningful, but Andre waved me off with a chuckle. "Don't worry about it, Ray. We've got it handled. Save your pennies." His words stung, but I didn't let him see it. I just nodded, biting down the fire rising in my chest. Then came the suit. I told Maya I would wear the same dark suit I had worn to her college graduation, the same one Denise had once chosen for me at a thrift shop when money was tight. To me, it wasn't just fabric, it was memory, history, a piece of the life we had built before anyone named Whitfield had entered it. Andre laughed when he heard. Laughed. "You can't wear that," he said, smirking. "This is a high-profile event. I'll have my tailor fit you for something proper. We can't have the father of the bride looking outdated." Maya's face flushed red. "Andre!" she started, but I raised a hand to stop her. "It's all right," I said, my voice even, because the truth was I didn't need his suits or his approval. My dignity wasn't stitched into expensive fabric. It was in the years of sacrifice, the nights of hard labor, the days of raising Maya with nothing but grit and faith. So while the Whitfields measured their worth in fabric and chandeliers, I quietly pressed my old suit and polished my shoes. It wasn't just clothing. It was a symbol, a reminder of Denise, of every step that had brought me here, of everything they could never buy. And I decided, no matter what they said, no matter how they looked at me, I would wear it proudly. Because I wasn't dressing for them. I was dressing for my daughter, and for the woman who should have been there to see it. Years before Maya ever met Andre, before the Whitfields even knew my name, I had made a choice that would change everything. It started quietly, small savings tucked away, rental properties bringing in modest returns. I learned patience, discipline. Where others chased quick money, I chased longevity. And one day, an opportunity opened that few saw and fewer still understood. Whitfield Industries. Their company was loud in the press, boasting expansion, growth, prestige. But beneath the shine, I saw cracks. Debt piling in the shadows, deals stitched together with pride rather than prudence. Where others saw a dynasty, I saw vulnerability. Through a holding firm, faceless and silent, I began acquiring shares, slowly, quietly, never enough to attract notice, but enough to matter. Months turned into years. The stock dipped. I bought more. Their board shifted. I tightened my grip, and then with one decisive move, I bought control. On paper, Whitfield Industries still carried their name. In boardrooms, they still strutted, shaking hands, bragging about deals. But the true power no longer sat in Charles Whitfield's office. It sat in mine. Only a handful of board members knew the truth. I made sure of that. My identity was sealed behind contracts and trusts, layered so deep no curious journalist could follow, because I didn't want recognition. I didn't need applause. I did it for Maya, for Denise, for the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the same people who looked down on me, who laughed at my thrift store suits and my old sedan, were building their empire on land that no longer belonged to them. When Andre first came into our lives, so smug, so sure of his family's supremacy, I said nothing. When Veronica looked at me across the dinner table with polite pity, I smiled and stayed silent. Because silence was my strength. And as I pressed my old suit for Maya's wedding, listening to Andre mock me behind closed doors, I remembered something Denise once wrote in her Bible margins. Let them believe they're above you. The higher they climb, the harder the fall. That day was coming. They just didn't know it yet. The morning of the wedding broke clear and cold, the kind of day that looks beautiful from a distance but chills you to the bone when you step outside. I dressed slowly, carefully, buttoning the same dark suit Denise had once chosen for me. The fabric was worn but pressed, the shoes polished until the leather shone. To anyone else, it was just an old suit. To me, it was armor. I slipped Denise's photo into my wallet, close to my heart, and whispered, I'll walk our girl down the aisle today. The venue glittered on the horizon, an estate hall dressed in flowers and silk. Luxury cars filled the driveway, Bentleys, Rolls Royces, gleaming machines lined like trophies. I pulled up in my sedan, paint faded, engine rattling faintly. As I stepped out, I felt the eyes. A valet raised an eyebrow. Guests glanced, whispered, some smirked. To them I was already out of place. Inside, the air smelled of roses and money. Guests floated in gowns and tuxedos, glasses of champagne in hand. I walked through quietly, nodding politely, ignoring the looks that followed. I found Maya before the ceremony began. She stood in her gown, radiant, tears brimming in her eyes when she saw me. "Daddy," she whispered, hugging me tight. "Thank you for being here." I kissed her forehead, fighting back my own tears. There's no place else I'd ever be. Andre appeared at the door, his tuxedo perfectly fitted, his smirk perfectly rehearsed. His eyes scanned me head to toe, pausing on my old suit. "Interesting choice," he said, voice low but sharp. "I told you my tailor could have fixed you up, but I suppose some men can't be polished." Maya stiffened beside him. "Andre," she began, but I raised a hand. "It's fine," I said. My voice was calm, steady, because I knew what he didn't. The ceremony unfolded with the expected grandeur, music swelling, vows exchanged, applause rolling through the hall like a tide. Maya looked breathtaking, Andre smug, the Whitfields beaming like royalty. But as the reception began, I could feel it building. The looks, the whispers, the way Andre's laughter grew louder with each glass of champagne, the way his parents paraded their wealth, shaking hands, boasting of deals as if the room were their stage. I sat quietly at a corner table, watching, waiting, because I knew the moment was coming. And when it came, the world they had built on pride would begin to crack. The ceremony ended with applause, cameras flashing as Andre kissed Maya's hand like he'd just sealed a contract instead of vows. Guests spilled into the reception hall, chandeliers glowing above tables dressed in white silk and gold trim. Waiters floated by with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, their trays balanced with the precision of soldiers. I found my seat near the edge of the room, away from the spotlight. My place card was tucked at the far corner of the table, not with family, not with friends, just an empty chair beside a group of Andre's distant relatives who barely glanced my way. From across the hall, I watched Maya laugh nervously with her bridesmaids, her gown catching the light. She searched for me with her eyes, offering a small smile whenever she caught my gaze. But each time she moved toward me, Andre's hand steered her back, guiding her toward the guests that mattered to him. The Whitfields were in their element. Veronica glided from group to group, her diamond necklace catching every flash of the camera. Charles shook hands with businessmen, his laugh booming as he bragged about new ventures. To them, this wasn't a wedding, it was a showcase. And then there was Andre, He circled the room with his glass of champagne, his confidence swelling with each sip. He told stories loud enough for the tables around him to hear, sprinkling jokes at my expense like seasoning. "Maya's father has always been a simple man," he said to one group, smiling wide, his words just loud enough to carry. "He believes in thrift." Laughter followed, polite but sharp. I sipped my water, face calm, heart steady. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to feel small. A woman in pearls leaned across the table, curiosity in her voice. "And what is it you do, Mr. Brooks?" I smiled politely. "These days, I live quietly, keep life simple." Her lips pursed, a polite nod masking the judgment in her eyes. The conversation shifted without me. I sat back, letting the noise of the room wash over me. I'd endured worse. I'd survived worse, but my hands clenched under the table, not from shame, but from restraint. Because if I wanted to, I could end every smirk, every laugh, every whisper in this hall with a single sentence. But not yet. This was Maya's day, and I would not tarnish it. Not until the Whitfields gave me no choice. And as the night wore on, I could see it in Andre's eyes. That choice was coming. The music softened, glasses clinked, and the laughter of well-fed guests filled the hall. Andre stood near the center, his arm draped over Maya's shoulder as if she were part of his trophy display. His voice rose above the crowd, louder with each toast, each sip of champagne. Finally, he lifted his glass high. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his grin wide, "allow me to introduce someone very important." He motioned toward me. Heads turned, conversations hushed. "This," Andre paused, smirk spreading across his face, "is my father-in-law, Leonard Brooks." For a moment there was polite applause. Smiles, nods, then Andre's voice shifted, sharp as a knife. "Now, Leonard is, how should I say this?" He chuckled, shaking his head as though amused by some private joke. "Let's just say he's that annoying beggar we've been forced to put up with, that—" The words dropped like a hammer. Laughter erupted. Not all of it was cruel, some nervous, some uncertain, but it spread like fire. I felt the weight of every gaze, every smirk, every whispered comment buzzing through the room. Maya froze beside him, her face pale. "Andre," she whispered, her voice tight with horror, but he ignored her, basking in the attention. The Whitfields laughed too. Charles with his booming voice, Veronica with her polite hand covering her mouth, though her eyes sparkled with approval. Around me, heads nodded, guests chuckled, each laugh another nail in the coffin of my dignity. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. My hands rested on the table, steady, though inside a storm raged. It wasn't the insult. I'd been called worse in my life. It wasn't even the laughter. I'd been laughed at before. It was the arrogance. The sheer audacity of a man who believed he was untouchable, who thought mocking me would elevate him further in the eyes of his family and friends. The room hummed with amusement, but then silence. Veronica's laughter faded first. She leaned forward, squinting at me. Her smile slipped, her brow furrowed. "Wait," she said slowly, her voice carrying over the crowd. "Wait just a minute." Her eyes widened. "Isn't he the mysterious investor who bought Whitfield Industries?" The words cracked like thunder across the hall. The laughter died instantly. Glasses froze mid-air. Whispers rippled, frantic, like the tide pulling back before a wave. Andre's smirk shattered. Charles straightened in his chair, color draining from his face. Maya's hand shot. To her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. And I stayed silent. Because sometimes silence is louder than any shout. The silence that followed Veronica's words was heavier than the laughter that came before it. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, their mocking smiles melting into confusion. Some whispered, others stared, waiting for me to deny it, waiting for the beggar's mask to slip. Andre laughed nervously, a high, brittle sound. "Mother, please," he said, forcing a grin. "You're mistaken. He's nobody." But Veronica wasn't laughing. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on me now, sharp with recognition. "No, I remember that face. The board meetings, your name was never on the paperwork, but you were there. You're the man who owns controlling shares in Whitfield Industries." The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Phones slid from pockets, fingers tapping furiously, guests desperate to confirm what they'd just heard. Charles stiffened, his glass lowering slowly to the table, his jaw clenched. Andre's smirk collapsed. "That's not true!" he snapped, his voice louder now, almost desperate. "He's lying! He's just some washed up—" But the crowd wasn't listening to him anymore. Their attention was on me. I stood slowly, adjusting the lapel of my old suit. Calm, deliberate. My voice carried steady over the hall. "For years, I've listened to your family boast about what you built. But the truth is simpler. Whitfield Industries hasn't been yours for a very long time." Gasps swept the room. Andre's face went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Maya's eyes darted between us, her hand trembling at her side. Veronica turned sharply to her son. "Andre, did you know?" Of course I knew," Andre stammered, sweat glistening on his brow. "He's bluffing." "He has to be." Charles's voice cut like a blade. "Then why do I recognize him too?" The room spun with whispers. Reporters disguised as guests scribbled notes. Every eye was on the groom who had mocked his bride's father moments earlier. Andre's hand shook as he pointed at me. "You're ruining this wedding!" he spat. "This is supposed to be my night!" I met his gaze, unflinching. "No, Andre. This was always Maya's night, but you turned it into a stage for your arrogance." The silence that followed was no longer heavy, it was damning. The reception hall no longer buzzed with celebration. It buzzed with whispers, sharp and cutting, every word a dagger aimed squarely at Andre. Guests leaned close to one another, murmuring, eyes darting between me and the man who had just mocked me as a beggar. Andre's face flushed red, his polished charm cracking like glass under pressure. He raised his voice above the crowd, desperate. "None of this matters. He's just trying to embarrass us. You all know me. You know my family, our wealth." But no one was nodding anymore. "Charles." Whitfield pushed back his chair, the scrape echoing across the marble floor. His voice was low but carried enough to cut through the murmurs. "Enough, Andre." Andre froze. "Dad!" "You mocked this man," Charles continued, his finger pointing toward me. "Why, standing in the shadow of an empire you didn't even realize belonged to him. You humiliated your bride's father in public with arrogance you didn't earn. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Andre stammered, his mouth opening and closing. The confidence that had carried him through the night was gone, replaced by panic. I didn't know. Nobody told me." "Because you never asked," Veronica said sharply, her voice cold as ice. She stepped forward, glaring at her son. "You never looked beyond yourself long enough to see who was sitting at your own table. You were too busy flaunting wealth you didn't even control." The whispers grew louder, a tide turning against him. Guests who had laughed at his jokes minutes before now pulled back, shaking their heads. One woman muttered, "Unbelievable, calling him a beggar." Another whispered, "And he owns Whitfield Industries." Andre's gaze flickered to Maya, desperate now. "Maya, please, say something." But Maya's eyes were wet with tears, her lips trembling. She turned to me instead, her voice breaking. "Daddy, is it true? You've been carrying all of this, and you never said a word." I nodded softly, my gaze steady. "Because I didn't need the world to know, Maya. I only needed you to know you were loved. That was always enough for me." Her tears spilled then, but they weren't for me. They were for the man standing beside her, the man she thought she knew. Andre reached for her hand, but she pulled it away, and in that moment, in front of the guests, the Whitfields and the world, Andre Whitfield wasn't the groom, the heir, or the charming success story. He was just a man exposed. Maya stood frozen in the middle of the reception hall, her wedding gown glowing under the chandeliers, but her face pale as paper. The laughter from earlier was gone. In its place hung silence, heavy and suffocating. Her eyes darted between Andre, red-faced and trembling, and me, standing quietly in the suit Denise had chosen all those years ago. The truth had finally landed, and it cut deeper than any insult. "Andre," she whispered, her voice shaking, "you knew how important this day was to me. You knew how much I wanted my father to feel respected, to feel included, and this is what you gave him? Humiliation?" Andre reached for her hand again, desperation plain on his face. "Maya, listen, he's not who you think he is. He's been hiding this from you, keeping secrets. Doesn't that matter?" But Maya pulled her hand back, tears brimming in her eyes. "No, Andre. What matters is that he never once disrespected you. He never once mocked you. And yet tonight, in front of everyone, you called my father a beggar." Her voice broke on the last word, sharp enough to cut through the stunned guests. I wanted to step in, to ease her pain, to shield her from the wreckage. But this was her moment, her realization. I could only stand and watch as the man she thought she loved unraveled before her. Memories flashed in her eyes. I could see it. The dinners where Andre laughed at my old suit, the moments he rolled his eyes at my quiet habits, the whispers he thought I hadn't heard. Piece by piece, the puzzle of arrogance fit together. Her tears spilled now, sliding down her cheeks as she turned to me. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it sooner. I should have believed you." I shook my head gently. "No, Maya. Love blinds us all. What matters is that you see it now." The guests shifted, murmuring, watching as the bride stood apart from her groom. Andre's face twisted, rage flickering through his panic. "You can't do this!" he snapped, his voice cracking. "You're my wife!" Maya's voice rose, clear and sharp, carrying across the room with a strength I hadn't heard since she was a child. "No, Andre, I was your wife for less than a day, and already you've shown me the truth. I will not spend my life tied to a man who mocks my father." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Veronica's hand flew to her mouth. Charles leaned back in his chair, silent, eyes narrowing at his son. Andre stumbled, his confidence shattered. The groom who had once strutted across the room like a king now stood small, broken, and utterly alone. Maya turned from him and walked to me, her hand trembling as it slipped into mine. "You're all I need, Daddy," she whispered. And in that moment, I felt Denise with us again. Her words in the wind, her pride in our daughter's voice. The reception hall, once glittering with laughter and champagne, now buzzed with a different energy. Shock, judgment, whispers like knives slicing through the air. What was meant to be a celebration had curdled into chaos. Andre stood alone in the center of it, his tuxedo perfect, but his face unraveling. Sweat glistened at his temples, his smile gone, his bravado drowned beneath the weight of the truth. He looked around for support, for someone, anyone, to defend him. But all he found were stares, cold, condemning. Maya clutched my hand, her tears drying into resolve. "This wedding is over," she said, her voice clear, strong enough to pierce the silence. Andre's eyes widened. "Maya, you can't mean that! It's just enough!" she shouted, her voice trembling but fierce. "You humiliated my father in front of everyone. You showed me who you really are. I'd rather walk away in this dress than spend a lifetime chained to your pride." Gasps rippled across the tables. Guests leaned closer, whispering furiously. Phones lifted to capture the moment. Some shook their heads. Others smirked, satisfied to see the mighty Whitfield stumble. Veronica's face was stone. "Charles," she hissed, "do something." But Charles only shook his head, his jaw tight. "No, our son did this himself." Veronica's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to Andre, her voice cold, final. "You've humiliated us all tonight. You've humiliated this family." Andre's face contorted, panic twisting into rage. "So what? You'd throw me away for him? For this man?" He jabbed a finger at me, his voice breaking. "He's nothing!" But no one believed that anymore. Not after Veronica's recognition, not after my calm silence, not after Maya's rejection. Business partners whispered as they quietly excused themselves, leaving behind untouched champagne. A groomsman muttered, "Unbelievable," before walking out. Even Andre's cousins shifted away, their laughter from earlier now gone. Maya turned to him one last time. "Consider this marriage annulled before it's even begun." Her words fell like a gavel, final and absolute. Andre's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He stood trembling, humiliated, as the crowd began to move, not toward him, but away from him. Guests swarmed around Maya, offering comfort, their eyes darting toward me with newfound respect. And in that moment, the Whitfield name didn't carry the weight it once did. The empire they flaunted, the arrogance they wore like armor, it had all cracked under the truth. And their golden sun was left standing in the ruins. The wedding hall was a battlefield left behind, flowers wilting under the heat of the lights, champagne glasses half full, whispers still clinging to the air like smoke after a fire. But I didn't look back. I walked out with Maya's hand in mine, the weight of the night pressing heavy, but the bond between us stronger than it had ever been. Days later, I found myself where I often went when the world grew too loud, at Denise's grave. The cemetery was quiet, only the wind rustling the leaves above. I knelt down, brushing away the fallen petals, and laid a single white rose at her stone. "Our girl is safe," I whispered. My voice trembled, but my chest felt lighter than it had in years. "She saw the truth." She walked away before the damage could bury her, and I was there to protect her, just like I promised. I pulled the boutonniere from my lapel, the small flower pinned to my suit at the wedding. I placed it gently on the grass, letting it rest against the stone, a symbol, not of what was lost, but of what we'd kept, dignity, family, love that outlasted humiliation. I sat in the stillness for a long while, remembering Denise's words in her letters, her voice in the quiet of our home. "Stand tall, Ray. Always stand tall." And I realized I had. The Whitfields could keep their chandeliers, their cars, their empty pride. They had nothing I wanted. What I had was worth more than all their gold. A daughter who finally saw my worth, a legacy built not on arrogance, but on patience and truth. When I rose to leave, the sun broke through the clouds, lighting the path ahead. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking alone. And as I closed the gate behind me, I knew this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. For Maya. For me. For the life Denise had always wanted us to live. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.